What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Stand Tall. It is the 9th of September, and diving right in, no planning ahead. Let's see where we're at. Wrapped up on 55 yesterday, 56 in the 9 situations, chapter 11. Bestow rewards without regard to rule, issue orders without regard to previous arrangements, and you will be able to handle a whole army as though you had to do with but a single man. 57. Confront your soldiers with the deed itself. Never let them know your design. When the outlook is bright, bring it before their eyes, but tell them nothing when the situation is gloomy. 58. Place your army in deadly peril, and it will survive. Plunge it into desperate straits, and it will come off in safety. Let's go over to the alternative and see. So, Master Sun says, give out rewards that are not in the rules. Give out directives that are not in the code. Mei Yao Chen says, consider the merit to give the reward without rules set up beforehand. Observe the opponent to make promises without prior setup of codes. Jia Lin says, when you want to take a citadel and overthrow a nation, you establish punishments and rewards outside your country and carry out directives outside your government, so you do not stick to your ordinary rules and codes. Very interesting. Like in the case of tyranny or something, where you have to carry out directives outside of your government for warfare reasons of sorts. Master Sun says, employ the entire armed forces like employing a single person. Employ them with actual tasks. Do not talk to them. Motivate them with benefits. Do not tell them about harm. Mei Yao Chen says, just employ them to fight. Don't tell them your strategy. Let them know what the benefit there is in it for them. Don't tell them about the potential harm. Wang Chi says, if the truth leaks out, your strategy will be foiled. If the soldiers worry, they will be hesitant and fearful. Zhang Yu says, human psychology is to go for perceived benefits and try to avoid prospective harm. Sometimes the prospective harm, even though it is less than the benefit, still weighs more heavy sometimes. I think there's a psychological reason for that. Confront them with annihilation, Master Sun says, and they will then survive. Plunge them into a deadly situation, and they will then live. When people fall into danger, they are able to strive for victory. Mei Yao Chen says, until they are trapped on difficult ground, soldiers are not fully concentrated in mind. Once they have fallen into danger and difficulty, then the question of winning or losing depends on what people do. So, that's very interesting. Those are some good thoughts. Those are some good reflections because they are very intense in nature. They are very finalistic and fatalistic. And that's kind of, I think, one of the good reasons to review some of this stuff is because, we don't ever even want to be in that position, right? We want to be on intersecting ground, right? We want to be amongst allies. So let's go over to this awesome book, The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. September 9th. Nothing to fear but fear itself. But there is no reason to live and no limit to our miseries if we let our fears predominate. Seneca, Moral Letters, 13.12b. Well, how about that? There's no reason to live and no limit to our miseries if we let our fears predominate. Yes, your soldiers. Yes, your employees. Yes, but if you have to fear and worry about some of the things that the commander and the general and those people are worrying about, then, nothing will get done, I guess. And so this is, I guess, the compartmentalization of warfare. This is the, you know, I guess the ruthless calculus of war. Save 2 billion here, but you have to lose 1 billion over there. It's, ruthless math, but if we don't lead fearlessly, and if we allow these things to seep in, like some of the other generals were saying, then those fears predominate. And it's part of your duty as a leader to protect your people from those fears. In the early days of what would become known as the Great Depression, a new president named Franklin Delano Roosevelt was sworn in and gave his first inaugural address. As the last president to hold office before the 20th Amendment was ratified, FDR wasn't able to take office until March, meaning that the country had been without strong leadership for months. Panic was in the air, banks were failing, and people were scared. You've probably heard "nothing to fear but fear itself" soundbite that FDR gave in that famous speech, but the full line is worth reading because it applies to many difficult things that we face in life. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. The Stoics knew that fear was to be feared because of the miseries it creates. Right? The things we fear pale in comparison to the damage we do to ourselves and others when we unthinkingly scramble to avoid them. An economic depression is bad. A panic is worse. A tough situation isn't helped by terror. It makes things harder. And that's why we must resist it and reject it if we wish to turn this situation around. Stoics knew that fear was to be feared because of the miseries it creates. So, do we give out rewards and employ tasks and motivate with and do not tell about the harm in order to confront them with annihilation? Do we, as generals and leaders, take on that responsibility? I think that's the real moral and ethical question, is when you're in a leadership position, whether you're leading yourself in your mind, do you personally disregard the fears? Do you look past the fears in order to overcome? I mean, that could be a viable strategy. If so, that's kind of what Sun Tzu, I think, is saying, is sometimes you have to withhold certain things from your men because those fears can seep in, that doubt can creep in. And I guess I didn't understand it a few reflections ago when we talked about it, but maybe it is essential that not only that your strategy isn't found out about by enemies, it's also so that your teammates and your people who depend on you don't know that, so they don't lose faith and they don't lose hope. Because if they know that we're about to have to, if they overanalyzed it the same way that someone else does, then maybe they would get frozen by fear. And that's what we have to fear, right? The Stoics say fear of paralysis, fear of all of these things, fear of, you know, whatever that keeps us frozen and unable to move forward, right? And this is the cheesy, like, unable to keep standing tall. Like, don't be afraid to stand up and be a better person for yourself every single day. So 1% better, 3% better, 2% better, always something. Keep standing tall.